Hi, and welcome to today's video. The focus of our video today is actually just more on Markdown, or RMarkdown, than actual coding. So we're going to be spending a lot of time sort of editing documents rather than writing code. For the rest of the videos, we're going to be sort of staying in our data science repository, which is new, so you'll get invited to that later in class. And today's assignment is just for our Markdown examples. And this is just the sort of empty place where the assignment will be. But the first thing I need to do is get this into my RStudio repository like we looked at in our last video. And so I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to clone it. You can use SSH or HTTPS. And then normally I would do file, new project. But I don't actually have to do that here because I did that prior. So once you've made a new project with version control, you should just be inside of this RMarkdown examples. And right now it's empty. And we're just going to sort of walk through the premise of RMarkdown and how it works, because that's how we're going to deliver all assignments in this class. So once you're in your repository, we're going to do file, new file, and we're going to actually just use RMarkdown. We'll say discharge data example. Because the focus today isn't on coding, I'm going to use some code that looks at something I'm very familiar with, which is looking at river flow in the Poudre River. And that'll be sort of my default example throughout the semester. So we'll just we'll call it that. And then what you're going to see is this Markdown file that RStudio pre-generates. And it has sort of some components that we'll walk through. So first of all, it just has a title. Tells you who the author is. It has a date, which is static right now. It just says it's a static date. And then it says the output is an HTML document, which is what we want. You can see that the file isn't yet named, so we'll go ahead and do Control S to save it. And I'll just save that as index.rmd. And the reason I'm calling it index has a specific reason, which is that that'll tell GitHub that this can host some HTML files. That means that they can be hosted live online, and we'll see that at the end of the video. But we're going to do index.rmd, and then everything else in this is fine. And the sort of primary idea with our Markdown is that you have chunks that evaluate code, like these ones, that are sort of denoted by these triple ticks, and then the bracket with the R. And then in those chunks, you can actually evaluate code, and then there's just regular text outside of that. And you can see that here in our Markdown sort of editor, but we can also click knit, and it'll render this our Markdown as an HTML file, so it'll look like a sort of web readable file. And now you can see, okay, that first chunk over here that said include equals false, that wasn't evaluated. So since that wasn't evaluated, we don't see it. So it was evaluated, but it wasn't included because the word include equals false is just some instruction to hide it, so you don't see this. And then you can see that the sort of double pound sign created larger text, sort of subtitle or title text. And then this text is just regular text. And you can see that this was sort of linked directly because it had the little surround tildes. And then these double stars bolded the text over here, so you can see that. So this is sort of like how you control Markdown files. There's a bunch of help files to sort of like have finer and finer control on this, but I'll send links to those. I won't go into every trick you can do today. And then once you get down to the code, this code doesn't have anything that says eval equals false or include equals false, and so it just evaluates it, and so it just runs this line of summary cars. Cars is just a data set that sort of ships with R, and so it just gives you a summary of that really simple data set, and then you can also plot a data set. And here there's the R Markdown has an example of echo equals false. And so echo equals false just means that it's not going to show you the code, even though it's going to evaluate it, which can be useful if you're sending a report to someone who doesn't care about the code. They just want to see the figures. So that's sort of the base template that RStudio will ship with, and this is sort of the most basic way to look at our Markdown file. We're going to add some unique attributes to it, including using some plotting softwares that are interactive, which is why HTML can be really nice. You can actually produce interactive plots pretty easily. So I'm just going to delete all the starter text that they gave us. And now I'm going to start sort of adding our own code. And so I'm staying in this setup chunk, and I actually left that one because I like it. It is the setup chunk, and I also want to not include it because when we load packages that we're going to use here, like tidyverse, which is a package for manipulation and plotting of data, or another package called data retrieval, which is for downloading USGS data. I don't want to see all of these like notifications that are going to pop up here once it loads in the console. So all this stuff would print in the RMarkdown if I didn't have include equals false. So I just kind of don't want that stuff to show. And then data retrieval, we're also going to load. I think that's all for now. And so then we'll just go in to quickly say data download. I'm just going to download some discharge data, which discharges the amount of water flowing past a point in a given time from the Poudre River. So I'll go look up some of the information I need. Poudre River USGS. So I just needed to get this code, this number, because I always forget it. And then now we're going to use this data retrieval package, and I'll make that big to download that data. So we'll make a new data frame. And again, this class is sort of starting with the understanding that you've taken some R before, so you know what a data frame is. And we're going to do read NWIS daily value. And now we can see sort of what this function needs to actually run the code. But I'm actually going to look it up in the help file, so I can just do question mark and then the title of the function. And so what it needs is site numbers, parameter codes, start dates, end dates, and stat code. So let's say site numbers, it's going to, not numbers, it's going to equal that site I just downloaded. The parameter code, if we go back to that website, that we want is discharge, so that's parameter code 0060. And start date, let's do some recent data. So we'll do the last 5 years of data maybe. 101, 2017. And end date equals 0101, 2022. And then the stat code we're going to use is 003, and we can sort of look in the help file. What does the stat code mean? It's a statistic code. It's usually 5 digits. So here's the daily mean, and that's what we want. So we'll download that data. Oh, it's not working. Let's see. What did I do wrong? Okay, so what I did wrong is I didn't read the help file. It says that the date should be organized in year, month, day. So we'll just go ahead and update that. 2017 0101 and 2022 0101. Okay, so now we should be getting 5 years of data. Okay, so now we get this new data set called Q, and I'll actually label this chunk downloader. And you can see in the top left, it actually gives you a nice table of contents, which is makes it easier to read through. And so we'll call that data downloader, or this chunk, and then let's go ahead and look at our data set. So it has agency code, site number, date, and then this stuff. We're only going to be looking at sort of USGS data, so we could remove this column and rename this one because this one's really long, but all it means is it's the discharge in cubic feet per second. So here we'll introduce a thing that I hope many of you have seen, which is called a pipe. And what a pipe does is it takes the results of this command and pushes it forward through a pipe to the next command, which we're going to use, which is called rename, and we'll just say Q, I'm just going to say Q equals that long title. And that should now have this simpler title to equal to just, it says it's the discharge. Okay, great. So that's really simple and basic. And then we can say data plotter. And now we'll just use some ggplot syntax, which I hope you already know, to make a sort of static plot of this data. So Q, and then the x-axis we want to be date, and the y-axis we want to be Q. And then we'll just make that a line. So we're going to use the geomLine command. And if this ggplot syntax is not familiar, or if this downloading syntax is not familiar, that's because, again, the focus of this lecture today is really on how RMarkdown works. It's not on the code itself. So we'll be going into more detail in some of these plotting packages soon. So we'll do ggplot that. Okay, so now we have our sort of plot, and let's relabel the x-axis, and we'll just say discharge CFS. Looks like discharge is quite low right now. Okay, so that's sort of like, we could even add a title. Discharge in the Poudre River, Fort Collins. Okay, so now we have this plot of river discharge in the Poudre River, and what we're doing right now is we're coding sort of live. So I'm running code in here, and it's printing out to the console, and it's printing out to the console when I download it, and then the plots are generating over here. But if we, again, the point of this lecture is sort of to think about knitting, and so we'll go back to the knit document. We'll click knit, and you'll see that this produces a little report, so you can have data download, data plotter. We got this warning signal, so it removed 31 rows when I plotted it, and that's because it hasn't they haven't updated their data apparently past 2022, or it was frozen and they took out the sensor or something. So we're missing some data in the last month, and so we have this warning sign. And so let's say I wanted to send this report, but I wanted it to be cleaner. I can go up here, and just like there's an include equals false up here, there's all these options for our chunks, and they're telling you what they are here. And the one we want is warning, and we want it to equal false. And so now, if we re-knit that, let's see if that little warning went away. Oh, I think I left the file open on accident. If I delete this, now we'll try again. I have a little problem. I'll figure it out. Okay, I had a problem. I was putting the warning equals false in the wrong code. We actually want it in the data plotter code. So now we'll knit that again and see if we can remove that warning that we had in the last version of that. So it's going to pop open, and now we don't have that warning. So it's sort of just like a cleaner report, which is great. That's sort of what we wanted. But one of the things that we're not taking advantage of here is that if you look at this, this is a static plot. We can make it, right now it's a little small too, so we can do some things to improve that. So we can say again, this little header area, we can say fig width equals, maybe I want it to be 8 inches, and fig height, maybe I just want it to be 5. So now I can knit it again and see if that figure's bigger, and if that sort of makes it easier to see dynamics that are sort of, happening faster than the sub-year basis. I keep getting this error. I'm having some cryptic errors that work after I just delete the HTML for some reason, so I don't really know. But I keep these errors in here to show you that even after 12 years, I have plenty of errors when I shouldn't. So anyways, what I'm trying to do is make the figure bigger, so we'll knit it again. And we're just sort of like, again, updating our document, making it more useful to us. And now that should look bigger when I open it in the browser. Okay, indeed, it's a little bit wider. It's still not, huge. And one of the problems is if I wanted to look at like what's going on in the discharge right now and what's happening here with this like increase in discharge in sort of late 2021, I can't see that because this is a static figure, and there's no reason for it to be static. It's HTML, you can zoom in on plots. And so what we want to do is actually add a plot that would be dynamic. And so we can look at this package called dygraphs, which is a JavaScript package, and we can use this help site that our studio made just to show you how to use dy graphs. And so we'll go back to our data set. We'll add a new package called dy graphs, which I think I already have loaded, but if I don't, we can install. Yeah, so I've already installed it, so I'm just loading it. And then we'll add a new section called interactive data plotter. And here we're going to use the dy graph syntax. And so this says dy graph lung death. So let's just see if it just works. I can tell you that it won't because we need to do a little more. So we can say dy graph q. Let's see if that works. Okay, so that didn't work. The reason is we need to format the data before we use it. And so here they're using sort of this data set that has already been told basically that it's a time series graph. So we need to be able to tell it, hey, this is an XTS time series object. So we need to use this XTS call to say, hey, the kind of data I'm plotting, it's time series data. And so we'll go back here and we'll say QXTS and we'll say XTS. And then I'm going to use the question mark trick again. So I'm back in the console and I'm just going to look what XTS usually says. Okay, so X is an object containing time series data, so it's Q. What we want it to actually do, there's this object containing time series data and then there's the order by. So in our case, the object containing time series data is actually just what we're calling Q in our data set. So that's discharge. And then we want to order it by the column called date. So we'll do Q $date, and that just says, the $sign just says grab the column date. And so here I did Q grab the column discharge, and then here I did Q grab the column date. And so now, I need to load the package called XTS. So we're adding packages. And now we'll have this object called QXTS, and then now let's see if we can make that a nice graph. Okay, so now we have this graph that we can zoom in on, which is really nice. And if we go back to the help website where we were getting some ideas for this, we can sort of look at the axis options, for example. And maybe I want to just change the axis to be properly labeled. So let's go here. We're going to use pipes again. And so we want to say dy axis. We're changing the y-axis label. It's not temperature, it's discharge in CFS. And we're not going to set a value range. We're just going to let it be generated from the data. And we're going to drop that pipe because we don't need it. Okay, and so now we have this sort of dynamic plot. And now when we knit this, if I don't get that random error again, we should have a plot in the center of the HTML that allows us to dynamically interact with the data, which is a big advantage from an HTML versus some static PDF report. So now we have the static data, and then now we have the interactive data. Okay, super cool. That's all sort of helpful, but it sort of is only scratching the surface of what our Markdown can do. So let's add some other pieces that we want to do. Maybe we want to describe the site a little bit. So let's do site description. And here I'm just going to add some headers just to sort of show you how how the report looks different once you add different commands to our Markdown. So I'm just adding a third tilde. So basically this would be like title, subtitle 1, subtitle 2, and the text's going to get smaller. And then we could have like a results section. And this could be like interpretation. So, and I did this backwards. Let's say this is methods, and this is site description. And this is data acquisition. And plotting tests. So I'm just sort of adding text so that you can see how this looks. And so what we're going to do here now is in the site description, we want to show an image of the Poudre River. And so to show that image, we're just going to go back to the USGS site, and we're going to grab this image of where they took a picture of where the data is. So this is at Lincoln Bridge, and this is their actual sort of USGS sensor setup. And what we're going to do is I'm going to copy the image link, and we're going to use a Markdown trick to just directly put that in here. So when you want to add a link in a Markdown, you can do this as a link, and then you can, the open square brackets is the text that the person will see, and then the parentheses, you put in the actual link. And so if we knit that now, this whole document, it's going to rerun all the code we ran. And it's also going to add in this new link that we added. And so this link, if we click it, will take us directly to that same picture. But maybe we just want the picture to be embedded. And to do that, we can take out the text and use a little trick, which is an exclamation point. And what that exclamation point says is, I actually want you to look for this link, and if it's a picture, I want you to embed it in the file. And so now we can do knit. And now we have a sort of, it's not really a site description, but it's a site picture, and then we have all of our code and text and interactive plots. And so let's say in our methods section, we wanted to sort of bullet point out what's going on at this site. So we can say the Poudre River at Lincoln Bridge is, and now I'm just showing you some Markdown tricks downstream of only a little bit of urban stormwater. So basically, if you want to have a list of bullets, you have to have 2 returns between each bulleted item you want to have. And I think actually you're supposed to have a tab in there. So you need to tab it out like this. And what else can we say about the Poudre River? Near Odell Brewing Co. Near an open space area. And the Poudre River Trail. Downstream of many agricultural diversions. So when you look at the discharge here, a lot of it's because of agricultural diversions upstream. So this is sort of showing some bulleted text, and then let's say we really want to highlight this last one, we can put the double stars around it to make it bold. So if we knit, and these are tricks, again, that you're probably going to be looking up all the time, but that's fine. The main idea here is to know that you can basically write text in here as if you're writing in a word editor, and you can make it nice and pretty and understandable. And so now we have a bulleted list, we have a bolded section, we have our sort of site description. But the document's getting kind of long, so maybe we want to add a table of contents. So this is sort of the where you start to edit the header file. And I always forget how to do this, so this is where you'll go to a website that you're always going to use for this class. So I just like to RMarkdown table of contents. And then you'll find there's a whole book on how to use our Markdown effectively. And so here we want to use this part where we want to add a table of contents. And I like it when it floats, and you'll see what that means. And I'm just going to copy this section, go back to my document, and here I'm going to change the output to read like this. So here it's saying output HTML document, and then some things I want to edit about that is that I want it to have a table of contents, and I want it to float on the side. So here we'll click knit again. And now we have this table of contents that sort of opens up and makes it easy to sort of move through this little report. And then the sort of final thing we're going to do here is we're going to use our Git skills to push this back up to the internet, give it some time to read it, and then we'll see that this site can be a public website that we can all take a look at. So I'm going to use this terminal to use Git for speed because it's a little bit faster. So what I'm going to say is git add -- all, and that's just saying, hey, grab. If we look at what this is going to do, it's going to grab everything in here. So it's going to grab the files, our Markdown, the git ignore, etc. We're going to add all those. We're going to commit this with a message, uploading our Markdown example. and then I'm going to push that. And so that's going to go back up to our repository, which we still have open. And so if we go here and refresh, we'll now have this like index.html. And something I did earlier, just so that this might actually render in time, is when you have a thing called index, basically you're telling the web, hey, this is a landing page for a web page. And so GitHub nicely will host small sort of semi-static web pages that you don't need to update quickly. But this is a great way to share your work with colleagues, to update people as you're going, to document your code, etc. And so you can go here and you can go to your sort of settings page, and then there's a thing called pages. And you can say, I want you to publish the document that's in my main branch, which is where this is. And it'll just look for anything called index.html. And then we can see, I doubt it's rendered already, but they render quickly. Okay, yeah, it is. So now this is just a public site of our report, and you could send this to anyone and sort of like look at the data. And so it makes it really easy for colleagues to sort of dive into your work. There are sort of size limits to this. You're not going to want to upload an HTML that's rendering a time series of millions of points. It won't work. But for smaller little reports like this is a really nice way to send people sort of updates. So that's sort of the brief intro to our Markdown. I do want to highlight one last piece, which is that while we generated this for now looking like a report, we can just change the header and make it a presentation as well. So there's all kinds of plugins that allow you to do that. I like this one called Reveal.js. So I'm going to go to another repository of my own where I have a website that I think works. It might not. We can go to the pages and see a website that is just a talk I gave. And so this is all generated in our Markdown as well, but it's just generated as a talk instead of like sort of as a presentation instead of as a report. And obviously you can see what's cool about this is that you could write a report that someone could read through, but then if you're giving a talk, all you have to do is change the header file and you can suddenly have your talk as well. So if we get out of this section, I just want to go back here. I'll just do that. Oh, no, I can't. I'm in the wrong link. We'll just do it the dumb way. I just want to go back to that main repository. So I'm going to go back to my talk, and I'm going to look in this index for how I did that. And so instead of having the output say HTML, I have the output saying all this crazy stuff, which is just saying, hey, use this Reveal.js style presentation. And so what we can do is take that, go back into our code here, replace this HTML document with it. And then we can click knit. And now instead of making that like sort of long report, it's going to make basically a slideshow. And so this is a really nice way to work if you know you're going to give a research talk first and then give a, do some kind of other update, like send a report to folks. Of course, it's not working. I think it has to work in the web browser. So now this is the same document we just made, but now it's a report, and it sort of looks like this, and you can sort of scroll through the bullet points, look at the pictures, show the code if you're teaching a coding class like this one. You'll notice on the last one, because I didn't tab it enough, we have all the data in one spot, so that would be something you'd have to fix. But this is sort of a way that you can have your reports be dynamic and address whatever need you have. And again, that's like a nice trick with our Markdown. So I think I will stop there. For the homework assignment, we're just going to generate a few different versions of these outputs and sort of focus again on our Markdown tricks and less on plotting and data analysis. We'll do more of that next week. See you soon.